invite the next panel to come up as I introduce you, but I think certainly a whole day's conference on digital transformation has got to be on the agenda of the organisers. There was lots in there. Thank you all very much indeed. To our next panel, do come on up. Let me introduce you, because we now have the opportunity to have the wonderful Chantal Mathieu, who is the chair of the European Diabetes Forum, and also Professor of Medicine at the Catholic University of Leuven, who is going to moderate this panel. And with her, up on the stage now, MEP Dan Nica, who is a Romanian engineer and a politician, member of the European Parliament for quite a few years now, Dr. Michael Linden, and we've got their names up there as well, which is fantastic, who is the founder and chief scientific officer at Handel Therapeutics, leading research and development into gene therapy for degenerative diseases. We have Anton Ussi, operations and finance director at EATRIS, the European Infrastructure for Translational Medicine, also vice chair of the ERIC Forum, and Dr. Ana Grazia Altavilla, who is a consultant at the Council of Europe, chair of the Task Force in Europe for Drug Development for the Young, and a lawyer specializing in human rights. Now we've got them seated, I just want to see if we might be able to play the video, because as we were saying in the previous panels, it is all about people. And if we could now, tech team, just let us settle in and take a moment to think about, as was touched on earlier, rare disease, and innovation and research that this panel are going to discuss is about bringing new innovation to unmet need. Let's hear about Danielle Drachmann's experience.
My name is Danielle, and I am a mother of two beautiful children, Noah and Savannah, who are living with a rare disease. What is less known is that I too suffer from this rare disease called pathological idiopathic ketotic hypoglycemia. I am not a medical doctor, nor was I trained in how to conduct research. But after years of life and death, levels of necessary commitment, I today consider myself an expert. After what seems like a lifetime of talking to affected families and working with medical experts, we are now able to create change, initiating research and publishing scientific papers on the field of complex hypoglycemia. But much more is left to be done. Optimistic rhetoric, polite handshakes, and all the LinkedIn updates in the world will only do so much. The work that needs to be done requires political action. After half a decade wrestling with the consequences of a rare disease, I have come to the conclusion that the keys to unlocking the recommendations is actually quite simple. It's through the partnership between the families, the medical experts and the industry. Without those partnerships, we might as well be fighting fog. As such, the only path forward is a path where the affected families, the medical experts and the industry walk side by side. What this means practically is that we need a European strategy and a European plan to ensure that these partnerships are established and maintained, just like we stated in our recommendations. This will ensure true innovation and need-driven approach to research, and innovation that will ensure that it actually has a life-changing effect on the affected families. There are some powerful people in the room today, people with influence. I would like to formally address this to the European Commission. Invest in the needed infrastructure to ensure co-created health research with patients and their relatives. So, my question for you is, what will you do? Will you let the fiery souls burn out? How did you respond, and what became of all of this? Well, that's entirely up to you. Thank you for having me here.
And thank you to Danielle. So, Chantal, your panel, over to you.
And I'm Chantal Mathieu, and I am an endocrinologist, but also doing quite a lot of research spanning from basic translational to clinical research. And I'm not known for my political correctness, and so I will not be politically correct today. And I want you all also to be active, because I was standing in the back of the room and was quite impressed by the fact that just one person stood up. So I'm going to have you stand up and speak, because in the end, we are Europe, and we need to make it work. And you need to let your voices be heard. Otherwise, we will just have a panel discussion amongst ourselves and nothing will change. So I want you to engage also. Because in the end, research and innovation is probably all we have in Europe. In the 70s, in France, when we had the oil crisis, there was a slogan, "On n'a pas le pétrole, mais on a les idées." I do believe that is what Europe is. We are the brightest. We are innovative. And we should not let other regions of the world tell us that we are old horses and they are the young horses. We can do better. But we can only do it if we all do it. And so I will start with Mr. Nyssa on, the question, what can we as Europe do, and what can you as Parliament do?
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Professor, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you and with all the other esteemed colleagues on this panel. So what we can do? So let's start with a disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I'm an engineer. So because I'm not perfect, I'm the rapporteur for Horizon Europe. So that's the largest research program of the European Union, and it's the largest in the world. So what we have to do is to make sure that we provide means, that means money, to have the research for the health system, to support the health initiatives. I'm a big supporter of the research on the pediatric cancer, just to give you an example, just because I think that we have to do more. And to create the right infrastructure. I know what you are doing. I had the chance to talk with you a few minutes before we started this session. And I think that to have the right research infrastructure in place, to have the right means for the researchers, and to create the ecosystem for the research in the health area, that will provide results. The other, it's in your hands, the other things.
But you start with your disclaimer about the engineer. Isn't that where our innovative way of doing things can be different? Namely, bringing together not only medical researchers, but also, the exact scientist researchers, the engineers, everybody together. Isn't that where our innovative way of doing things can be?
Let's have a second disclaimer. While I was in university, I'm an electronic engineer, so my graduation project was a medical electronic device. And I got 2 silver medals in Brussels, which was unusual for that period because it was before the fall of the Iron Curtain. So, if you want, let's put it the other way. So investing in basic and applied research, it is a key. Because from one hand, you're a professor, you're a doctor. You know very well what you have to do. But then you have to put the means in the hands of your patients and the other doctors they don't have a chance to work at the very good research facility. They don't have all the means. So then you'll be able yourself to collect the data and be able to provide the right kind of information, the right treatment. So I'm a strong advocate of medical devices, wearables, and everything which is related to make the life of patients easier, early detection, the right treatment, and the right assessment of the results.
Very good. I agree with you.
And I'm an engineer.
But I work continuously with engineers. Anton, I will come to you. Translational medicine, how important is that in answering the question?
Well, I think translational medicine is a broad word to really describe the part that everybody has in this process, which is the process of taking the foundational knowledge that's been done in the clinic, done in the labs, and actually applying that into a human condition and trying to fix that or keep somebody healthy. So translating knowledge into patient impact, it's a very long and arduous journey. And I think for Europe to succeed, we have to recognize that it's a relay race. And there's a lot of actors in that relay race. And don't get stuck in your process thinking your process is the end of that journey. So the academic, the publication is not the end, that's actually the beginning. And at that point, the baton might be handed on to somebody else. So in that process of designing, executing, funding a research study, don't ask yourself only what publication can I have, but what do I need to do to make this data robust enough so it's picked up and taken through the next phase? And everybody has a role to play in that, the institution, the research funder, the academic themselves. And then in the next phase, it has similar structural inefficiencies. So we need to see ourselves in this relay race and always ask ourselves not only what should I study, but how should I study it best so that my data can be used in the next phase.
I really like that approach because, as I told the Member of Parliament, Mr. Nasser, I am coordinating a big IMI2 project. And what I've learned indeed is that we as academics, we are very good in innovation and in bringing techniques or whatever to a certain level. But where industry can step in is in standardization, is in scaling. And only that step will be able to bring medicines, new biomarkers, etc., to the people who need it. And so, as I told you, I'm a big fan of this public-private partnership because that's also quite unique in Europe. Our American friends are looking at us with eager eyes, and now they're starting to duplicate. So they're becoming Chinese, they duplicate. But you see my political correctness. Anyway, but so that is where we have an edge. That is where we have this advantage, this knowledge of collaboration. Open, disclose all conflict. But that is also crucial. We need the blue sky research, we need the translational, but then we also need this collaboration to get it applied. So you hear me coming, I believe, when it comes to collaboration between academia, big industry, etc. How can we answer the question of the person living with a person in her family with a disease?
Yes, so first I actually like to update the introductory slide. Handle Therapeutics doesn't exist anymore. It was acquired by UCB, so I now work with UCB, a Belgian pharmaceutical company, heading the gene therapy research platform. How can we do this? I think in one sentence, I would say we have to develop a common goal, and I don't mean necessarily from the policymakers, because I see here in this venue and overall that this common goal is being developed. I think we are developing it. What I'm thinking about is really the front line, and this comes a bit closer to what you're saying, the front line of medicine's development, which has a number of pillars in it. It has academia, it has spin-out companies, it has pharmaceutical industry, it has clinics, it has investors. Now, each of these pillars have different core objectives and different core incentives also to do what they're doing. And I think what we're missing here in Europe is a little bit an infrastructure to overcome the disparity between these core incentives and core objectives. So if we look at the US, where I've worked for about 20 years, and in the field that I've been engaged in, which is gene therapy, a lot of the development actually has come out of academic hubs. And these hubs were not just academics writing papers, but they developed technologies, scalable technologies, measurable technologies, and acted as magnets for drug development. If you look at the pipeline in industry right now, the majority of the late-stage gene therapy pipeline actually come out of one of these four hubs that are there. We don't have any of this here, really. What we have is, individuals with excellence in the different pillars. But I think what we need to do is we need to create a common language, something of translational hubs, which allow us to address the fact that we need to speak the same language. An academic has to understand the pressure points of industry, has to understand the potential that investment gives, has to understand the risk that needs to be taken to engage in this. And I think there we really need an infrastructure. And I think sort of centralized infrastructures, for example, in ATMP technologies, which we're working on right now, would be very helpful to bridge this cultural divide.
But so what disruptive actions need to happen to have these innovation hubs also in mainland Europe? And I weigh my words because I do know that in Cambridge, in the UK, and in other places in the UK, they are building these hubs and they have these hubs. So what do we as European Union need to do, we as people in academia, we as people in industry, we as politicians, what disruptive actions are needed to have these hubs also in our union?
I think we're in the process. As you know, there is a new topic text, a new IHI topic text to establish a European research and development ecosystem in the context of the rare disease moonshot, but this can of course go beyond rare diseases, including rare diseases, but potentially in the future also more common and complex diseases. Success of this IHI program would establish already 2 or 3 hubs within Europe. So I think there's a tangible step forward towards this. And then there are different things. So I think one of the reasons for the difference in investment, US versus EU, 25 billion versus 2 billion 20 years ago, as the difference in investment, is also a little bit cultural in sense of what is our approach to risk? How do we like to approach risk? And of course, if you create spin-out companies, there's always a great risk. You know, you have how do you incentivize people to join this? And that comes back to a component which we cannot forget, which is talent development. So we have to develop in these novel spaces and innovative technologies. We have to develop talent that shares the willingness to take these risks and be able to recognize the risks in order to address them.
Yeah, I think we are genetically selected to be risk averse in Europe. Otherwise, we would have been on the Mayflower or the Red Star Line, going to uncharted territories. Those who stayed are risk averse. So how can we make this risk averse population also embrace this, you know, this way of doing things? Yes, please.
It's an interesting point you raise there, because this is something at IATRIS we've been working on for quite a lot of years, is understanding the risk profile of the researcher, knowing you're not going to change their risk profile. So what can you do? You can change the perception of risk by bringing the ecosystem around them, bringing the expertise around them, so that they know that they don't know what questions to answer, but they know they can find somebody who can ask the right questions and help them do the right things to actually reduce the risk. Creating this ecosystem is only the first step, though, because you can have everybody standing around, but if the researcher is not really induced by funding mechanisms and by really policy pressure to go and create patient value, they will focus on their own career and their institutional requirements.
Voilà. Yeah, voilà. You heard what he said. It's, you know, but that's the bottom line. We as academics, how am I evaluated? By impact factors, by publications, by journals. And I go and publish, you know, I put it out there. And then my IP agency says, did you patent your invention? No, I published it in Nature. And, you know, that's how we think, and changing this, because we have a different monetary incentive than what our American friends have. And so also, you know, giving a value to patents, to translational actions, to communication actions, etc., finding a way to, you know, to put a value on that in the career of researchers is important. I'm going to give the word now to Ms. Altavilla, because as an advisor of the Council, I see you listen very carefully. How do you see this? How do you see the answer? How can we as Europe change this?
Meeting the challenge of making an European economy the best, the European most competitive knowledge society, while ensuring a high level of protection of human health and ensuring also an access to medical treatment, requires sure to invest and carry out innovative research. And I think that everybody agree about that. But we have to take in mind that this innovative research raises the most complex issues that are in a scientific point of view, but also in the legal, ethical, and societal point of view, especially when we include in research vulnerable populations like children or, for example, rare disease patients. That's why we need to think about it. We need to keep in mind this, and we need to drive innovative research towards especially unmet and uncovered medical needs, setting up multi-stakeholders model of governance, of course, ensuring an adequate legal framework, but also setting up multi-stakeholders model of governance and promoting multidisciplinary research. It's very important because we need to engage people, and we need also, with a multidisciplinary approach, comply with the fundamental rights that are the common basis of the European Union. This is very important for us because if we want to improve the trust of people and citizens in the system, we need to include them in the decision-making process, and we need also to ensure the implementation of fundamental rights on which everybody of us agree.
Yeah.
And there is a common basis.
Yeah, I very much like also the fact that you bring in the voice of the citizens, you know, the voice of people living with diseases. In diabetes, we have now something about language matters. So we don't call people living with diabetes patients anymore, because they have a life outside their disease. And so we talk about people living with a disease, and that's crucial to really also think about innovation and research. So I see Dr. Söderberg from the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation sitting there. And so in Inodia, this IMI project, she leads what we call the PAC, the Patient Advisory Committee. Mm-hmm. Patient, we used the word, but that was a long time ago. But so having people with diabetes listen to what we as researchers, as industry are doing is so important. Because in the beginning, we thought we had to translate our research in lay language when they said, tell us what your research means. But it's not tell us what your research means, it's tell us what your research means to me. Do you understand? You know, what is this bringing? Why do you do these, what you describe as innovative things? Why do you do this? And so this is also very important because the citizens elect the members of parliament. And so bringing in this voice of citizens and people living with diseases is I believe, crucial. I see you nod.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It is about the mechanics, how to deliver this efficiently, right? And if we look at medicine's development, time is a very important component for patient value. If we look at how medicines are developed, if they start out in academia, we have a handover to, for example, a biotech, right? Usually that's totally serendipity driven. So a person knows a person, knows a person, knows an investor, and maybe something happens. Hubs like Boston, for example, or the Triangle in the UK, facilitate this matchmaking. And then when we lose even more time, is handover from spin out from biotech company to pharma because, of course, one of the maybe unspoken core objectives of biotechs are an exit, right? A financial exit, which means not everything has been developed to the standards that pharma would develop it. So what we do is we spend 2 years of reinventing technologies in order to be able to really deploy them towards patient. So what we need to do is we need to bridge these. What we inadvertently will gain is potentially a lot of time. Now, how can we do this here in Europe? Because this also needs investment, and I wanted to bring something else up. There's something like a confidence index when it comes to investment. And I think in US must be number one in the confidence index, and European countries, some of them, I haven't looked at all of them because it's not my day job, but are somewhere in the double digits. Belgium may be 16 herein, and so on. So maybe government or the politicians can do something to enhance an infrastructure and methods to enhance this confidence value, that investors actually would like to invest more here. And I think there are many ways that one could think about doing this.
I hear a mantra coming back saying we have the brains, we know how to do it, but build the infrastructure and they will come. So this is an important message. And perhaps indeed member states can be pushed to think in that direction, build generic infrastructures, hubs that can then be populated by the bright brains that we have in Europe. What do you think?
Yes. So, as I said, I was the rapporteur of Horizon Europe, 95 billion euros. Out of them, a lot of billions for health. But there is an instrument, which is called EIC, European Investment Council. It's the only instrument in the European Union who answers actually to your concerns, how to go from lab to fab. Although we are not allowed to go on commercial prototypes, with this instrument, you can do whatever you want to get money in order to have pre-commercial prototypes. That was a very important missing piece of legislation, because it's, as you rightly said, we have the research in place, we have the brain, but how we can move on? We don't have the hedging funds, the hedge fund like in the US. And one of the battle was how to convince the people that it's worth taking the risk, financial risk. Maybe only 1 out of 10 projects financed through European money will be to prove to be successful. But that will make the difference. In Silicon Valley, is 1 out of 10. But with one successful project, you have a lot of the return on your investment. And how to build the hubs? Look at Champollion in Lisbon, a very nice center for the cancer research. Look on the chips, because I'm working on chips. IMEC, Leuven. That's an amazing facility, because everybody, they were putting together their capabilities, and it is a success story. In the US, they do that now, the US Chips Act, and they duplicate Chinese way, the IMEC in Leuven. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Oh, yes.
But what is missing for some key decision makers like myself? The inputs, because we don't know everything. So what we try to do is to listen to the people who really know what you have to do, when and where. So how we can create this kind of communication, that's extremely important. Because even in the Horizon Europe, for the health area, we haven't had enough information, unfortunately, inputs. Yeah. And this is why sometimes the decisions, they are not easy.
They're not fit. Yeah.
It's difficult to understand for the people. They don't know how to access money. Even for you in Brussels, here in the capital, the money they're here. I met a doctor and say, how I can access the EU money for the research, because he was working in the university here in Brussels. And they say, you don't know? No. So transfer information, giving access, and create this connectivity, because otherwise you cannot take advantage of the existing
Yeah, I think your point is also very well taken to us. Namely, there are opportunities, but we don't exploit them enough. And so that's perhaps a task for our universities, for our institutions, to do a better job also to inform the researchers in a way that we understand. Because, you know, we chose technology or medicine, we chose research because we don't like administration. Otherwise, we would have become administrators. So it's, yeah, how can we promote this information transfer? I've been looking a few times in the audience. Yes, please, we have a question in the audience. Can we have a microphone, please, in the middle? Ah, you see, we surprised them, huh? Là, there. Do like this, voilà. If you can briefly introduce yourself.
So my name is Manny Stiliado. I work for Takeda, which is in the R&D division of Takeda. It's a pharmaceutical company.
Takeda.
And you've asked us to be politically not correct, so I will take my chance. So there is a common denominator among the clusters that you've mentioned. So the clusters in Boston and in Cambridge. And they're always around a big university or some universities. But it's also around universities who have been challenged to be also privately funded. So these are universities that they know that in order to continue being top of the league, they need to find other ways to source, to finance themselves, other than the normal grant that comes from the government. So this creates a hunger. This creates a push. It creates a bit of a stick, which means it also tells the researchers then, go out and find other ways to fund. Could that be an indication of what it is that creates these clusters? Because it makes people then incentivized to go out and create the partnerships and to try to find the financiers and therefore create the cluster.
We're back to the incentives. We're back to the incentives. And again, coming from a university in Leuven that is also private, and where IMEC is, I hear what you're saying. It comes back to how incentivize your researchers, your environment to, you know, to take the jump.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really good proposal, and in part, and I'm coming back to Leuven, we founded Handle Therapeutics exactly that way. Namely, what we did is we decided to go for industry financing, so strategic financing, not venture capital, and partner with the KU Leuven as our research arm. And what we did is we didn't just use them as a research collaborator, we used this particular lab and incorporated it physically into our company. So there was an academic arm of a lab working at a startup biotech company. And what this was phenomenal. First of all, it made it much easier to teach the investigators in this academic lab, you know, how to deal with IP, how to quality control, how to do release criteria, and so on. All of a sudden, this language became fluent, right, in both arms, and on our side also to learn from the academic rigor. So yes, we've tried this template. I think it's been an income source also for the university in this case, and I think thinking outside the box, like your proposal, is exactly what might get us started. I suspect that once we have started, it'll become easier because there will be revenue, right, through the spin-out companies, through the activities, and so on. But to get started, I think these kind of templates we have to try.
Yes, please.
I fully support that, but I think a big part of the challenge therein is reaching the critical mass of knowledge and skill in these institutions, the technology transfer officers, the corporate lawyers, who know sufficiently about the material to be able to be part of a deal that really extracts the maximum value towards the next phase. So the main issue we have, I think, a lot of the time is that the technology transfer departments are underfinanced and a bit short of expertise. We have corporate lawyers that will dial down the risk to zero in a clinical trial agreement or anything related to GDPR. And so I think a big part of how we can create these ecosystems, they don't have to be geographical, they can be virtual ecosystems, and bring to bear critical mass in the knowledge, and also focus long-term on upskilling people, so they know not only their function, but all the parts of the value chain that they're sitting on.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, I'm very sensitive to this incentive. How can you incentivize researchers to be innovative, etc.? I think you need different finance models to be completely innovative and do blue sky research and to do research on calcium channels. You don't need the pressure. You need, baseline finance. You don't need your model. You need money to be able to do that. And then on the other hand, to get the translation going, you need this incentive. But you need both models, I think, of financing of our academic and other forms of research. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's not just all about your kind of research. We also need the calcium channel people. I'm sorry for the calcium channel people.
I fully agree. Yeah, I fully agree with this, and I think it's important to understand that each modality has slightly different different requirements. I guess what's more important to me is not my model. We designed that specifically for the success of our startup. What I think is important is also not just money. What I think is the context into which money is given, which must be a multi-stakeholder context. It cannot just be an academic or definitely is not just going to be a startup company. It needs to be something that incentivizes this collaboration.
Can we have a mic on the right, please? You have a mic, Jeanette, Dr. Soderberg.
Thanks. So hi, everyone. I'm Jeanette Soderberg from JDRF. JDRF is one of the largest funders of diabetes research in the world, a private foundation started by parents who had children with diabetes. And I wanted to comment on two things. One is putting the patient at the center of research and why translation is so important. In the previous session, we heard that patients want to share their data. Coming back to the basic, patients want to be healthy. That's why they share the data. They don't want to share the data for the sake of doing it, but because it gives them something. And same with translational research. We need to have it because people need a cure, people need a treatment. Engagement in care is fantastic, it improves lives of people today. But how do we move beyond today? How do we make people healthy in a long fashion? That's through medicine or devices. So I really do believe that we need more research in these places, and involving patients from the start avoids going on a tangent and doing things like developing a product that no one will use. But I also want to hear your comments on how do we sustain the things that we develop. We have a tendency of funding small projects, which is fantastic, but after 3 years, these innovations go from the lab onto the shelf and they never reach the patients. So how do we engage with regulators? How do we engage with outcomes research, with health economics, to actually make sure that whatever we develop reaches the end person, the person with the disease who needs a cure and who needs a treatment?
I think, Mr. Nisa, this is very close to your heart also. You put in a lot of money in research. How do you make the results sustainable? How do you prolong the life of the results? How do you make them work?
Well, that's another. The question is not difficult. The answer is complicated. So, when we decided to create, because the Commission, they came with Horizon Europe, it was a proposal, and then we changed it. Why we changed it and how we changed it? We have the different conversation with the stakeholders, with the universities, with the research centers, so on and so far, and we try to identify what are the differences between the EU and the US? Why the US they can be successful in certain areas and we are not so successful? And what are the major differences is how we'll be able to create the link between the research and the shelf, as you rightly mentioned. And here, one initiative is to create a giant database called full anonymized, and also following some criteria, because what we need is to see the track record of the patients, again, without any identification data, name, addresses, or things like that, and to try to identify their, what was their medication, what were the analyses, and then to try to do some kind of cross investigation to see how you can have a better use. That will be extremely helpful. Look at the COVID. The giant database and the common database in 2020 helped a lot to develop new treatment, new vaccine, things like that. So I think that's one way. Another way is to use, we don't have powerful instruments, but we have EIC at least. We have 20 billion euros. Let's use them. We have on the widening the hope on, because the universities from the low-performing countries, they are not very much welcome to join Leuven and Fraunhofer Institute in a consortium. Let's assume that this is the case. But if you take a university from Iași, with Opon, they came with their own money. So that means you create a larger ecosystem, because you don't know where it might be the so-called rabbit.
You see me guilty, I'm writing down what you're saying because I didn't know.
That's my mistake, that's my fault. Yes, we don't know. This is why we have this health summit, this is why we have different opportunities, but we have to have a structural exchange of information. This was my conversation with Commissioner Maria Gabriel. She's responsible for research, and I said, how you do that? And she came to Galați, which is the very eastern university center in Romania, 10 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, just to deliver a message. Research is equally important in Galați, 10 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, as it is in Brussels. But how we can create the instrument? How you know what are the calls? What are the opportunities? This.
Yeah. But I will come to Ms. Altavista, because you said the voice of the citizen, and it's still reverberating. I think it's crucial we as a community also communicate, not only you to the scientists, but also the scientists and everybody else to the whole general public, so that they know what we are doing, and they know how important it is, and they are willing to spend 1% of their taxes or whatever to research and innovation. I will give the word to Ms. Altavilla, and then I will come to you.
Okay. First consideration, not answering to your question, but to the question of funding. I represent the TEDdy Network, which is a network for pediatric research, and I have to say that unfortunately funding for pediatric research is not foreseen for the moment in Horizon Europe. So maybe there is a lack of investment in pediatric research. This being said, and it's a pity because we are talking about since today about the future generation involvement of children, and in terms of funding, we don't, the goal is not achieved. This being said, coming back to the concept of patient-centered research, TEDdy is since a long time extremely involved and engaged in promoting empowerment and participation of children and families in research, setting up an advisory group at the local level, and right now we have a TEDdy Kids group that is very engaged in advisory activities. We strongly also support the Council of Europe initiatives on children participation regarding decision-making regarding the health. There is a guide that is being released by the Council of Europe. It is under consultation, and using as a guidelines the principle included in the guide, TEDdy is engaged in promoting good practices. I would like to provide you an example that is an example useful also for data protection issues or the using of data, for example, and the trust of patients in the using of data for research. We developed within the European Joint Programme for Rare Diseases a pediatric workshop to train people about different aspects of pediatric research in rare diseases. And we also set up, we elaborate and we develop Ascent Form for using, for processing of health data and reuse of health data within European Reference Network that you know are a key network for developing medicine for rare diseases. So we train people, we use the authorization form from the adults. We submitted them to the children using the colors methodology. In red, what was not clear, in green, it was clear, and in pink, what need to be improved. And after after collecting all the feedbacks, we elaborate a simplified form that we submit again to children coming from different countries. And we developed the last version, the agreed version of the Ascent Form. But what it appeared doing this kind of exercise, it was that, first of all, answering to the questionnaire saying that at evaluating the awareness of people regarding, of children regarding rare diseases in general, research in rare diseases and registries, for example, we understood that they didn't know, for example, what is a registry in a European Reference Network. And they cannot understand how data are used, where the data go. That's why they ask us to develop child-friendly, lay summary information material to really understand what happened during the research process, to understand the needs, to understand how they can contribute, and to develop specific tool for children, because there was pediatric, but it could be applicable to in other fields.
Yes, and I think you come back again to the importance of this communication.
Yes.
So you give the example of the children. You can give the example of elderly individuals. The example was given on the data. You know, you need to be able to apply it, but also how to bring this message of what we are doing on innovative research is important for elderly individuals. So communication again.
You've got one quick comment.
I know, and I'm looking at my time because at
it's running out.
25 past the hour, we end. Go ahead. Wait, the mic is not working. Yeah.
Orla Galvin, Executive Director of the European Federation of Neurological Associations. Jeanette, to answer your question, hi. Patient engagement right from concept to clinic is essential to every step of the way. Why are we not seeing policy implementation for patient organisation in these big EU pockets of funding from concept to clinic, from academia to industry obviously needing to take over because universities don't have that capital? And why is it falling on patient organisations to generate, particularly for rare diseases, the real-world evidence and the real-world data for those academic institutions to get the seed funding to kickstart innovation in areas that need it most? Why is it falling on us and yet we're being left out of the conversation, except for work package 4 when it comes to communications and dissemination? It's not good enough.
Anton, I will give to you, and I will also come back to it. Yes.
I think there's a lot of work still to be done on patient engagement, but I do see it improving. For instance, in the European Joint Programme in rare diseases, their projects are welcome to have patient advocacy groups, and they are financed under the projects. We've just launched a big repurposing project where, in fact, there's a patient champion for every single project we would support in medicines repurposing. So it's coming. It should come better and faster, but it is coming. And the question about why you're being left to do these really important things is because there's no commercial model right now. So there is no owner of the process of creating value. So it's being left to you because you're the people who really have that ownership, because you're the ones whose lives depend on it. An academic's life depends on the publications. That's just the nature of the business. A clinician on the healthcare process, not on making a registry for you. And we rely on great research clinicians to do those registries with you. But while there's no ownership, only agency, it's always going to be left to you whose lives depend on it the most.
Can I just give the example of the IMI2 program now becoming IHI? So again, Inodia was the first project to have this patient advisory committee. And as I said, it's not only about what does it mean and communication. People with diabetes were from day one an integral part of the group who made the protocol. They decided on how much blood could be taken from a child, from an adult. They helped us translate it to ethics committees. They decided on how frequently people came to the clinic to give their samples. We took them then also in the design of our clinical intervention trials. As academics, so in every trial meeting group, every trial steering committee, there is a person with type 1. And now I can give you the example of Sanofi, not a small company, who invited our patient advisory committee to design with Sanofi an intervention trial using an anti-CD40 ligand, an anti-CD40 inhibitor. So we are getting there, but it's only thanks to vocal groups like JDRF pushing people with type 1 diabetes to stand up and take their role that we got there. So it's all to the communities living with diseases to stand up and say, we need to be a part of this. And we need to be a voice in the design of your protocols. So people with a disease are sometimes the most innovative, and they help us in designing these protocols. So yes, please have them. You now with UCB, are you open to this voice of people living with the disease?
Oh, I think I don't even have to talk about a single company. I've worked at Pfizer before, at UCB and so on. Yes, patients are at the center of this development. Development is just very, very complex, and but interactions with patients, organization is a day-to-day occurrence.
Excellent. Sue, I feel your breath in my neck.
I'm getting little messages, Chantal.
Okay.
It's those little.
I have
little
questions
messages.
here.
It's an amazing discussion. Thank you. It's so interesting, and I think again it's something you could spend all day, a whole conference on. And it's lovely to have your expertise as a moderator, as a professor, moderating this panel. What amazing things! I thought it was lovely how Anton described it as a relay race with everybody playing their part. And I was so pleased to hear Michael say there is something good going on in the UK. The innovation incubators. We do have some things that we're proud of. And yes, they are great. They do these matchmakings. And they get the people together. They join the dots of what you've all been talking about there, including the patients and getting the funding. And it is really wonderful to see how that is working. So, rah-rah for the UK on that. But what a wonderful, wonderful panel. I hope you're going to take these discussions on into the lunch, because there's a wonderful opportunity now. I hope you're going to look at the artistic creations that have been going on there. I hope you're going to vote on the recommendations, do some amazing networking, and most of all, join me now in thanking Chantal Mathieu and her amazing panel. Bravo, bravo. Thank you. Let's see you all back here at 2:20, please, with plenty more.